since I've hosted a webinar. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar Introduction to Wikitree with Veronica Williams. Before I start, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Today's webinar about Wikitree presented by Veronica, who is an ambassador for Wikitree. She's also very knowledgeable about using Wikitree for DNA, and I'm sure that some of you are here for that purpose. So if I may just change, I'll unmute Veronica, that would be helpful, and make you, clicking the wrong buttons today, make you a presenter, Veronica. If you can let me know when you've got that.
I have. Oh, hang on. Can't seem to.
Yes, we can see your screen now.
Oh, you can you? Oh, okay. Must have done something. Oh, the machine didn't seem to be responding to me, but anyway, never mind.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, and settle down for a wonderful webinar, and I'll leave it to you, Veronica.
Okay, thank you, Danielle. Thanks for that introduction, and hello to everybody out there this morning. Today I'm going to be talking about Wikitree. It's an introduction to Wikitree, so I'm going to be doing a tour of the site, and there's quite a lot in that, and so we may not cover in detail everything that you may be interested in, but if we have time at the end and there's questions, we might be able to go live to answer some of those other questions if I haven't covered it throughout the session. I've been a member of Wikitree since 2013, and I stumbled upon it trying to do some brick wall research many years ago. And as Danielle said, I'm an avid DNA researcher, as some of you would know, and one of the things that really got me hooked on Wikitree was the DNA features that they started to introduce a year or so later. It was also a place where I'd been looking for a long time about where I could publish some stories of my family, and I was never happy with sites like Ancestry or Family Search that don't give you, well, you can write notes about your ancestors, but they have to be, only limited people can see those things. So I wanted to have a place where I could write my own stories, and Wikitree is, for those of you who might be interested in setting up a blog, sort of like having a blog without having a blog, that you can do all the things that you can in a blog, mostly within reason, but still be part of a major infrastructure. So I've got this title called Wikitree Ambassador, but basically that's
We've lost your sound, Veronica.
with erroneous information sometimes about particular ancestors, people taking wrong information, etc., and with not using sources. And so a one world tree has an advantage that people are forced to collaborate because there's only one profile per person. Now, Wikitree is not the only one world tree around. We've also got Family Search and Jenny. Now, Family Search I find very clunky. I don't know how others feel. And Jenny, I've still only managed to get half my family on there, and you do have to pay for some functions on Jenny. But Wikitree is free and similar to Family Search, and the One World Tree is particularly useful if you're interested in DNA and trying to look at connections with other people. So this is the home page of Wikitree, and www.wikitree.com, and it's a very long home page, so make sure when you're looking at this home page that you scroll down to the end, because there's information there that changes every week. And these are the key things about Wikitree: that it's a free family site, that it's a single family tree, as I mentioned before. There's a whole lot of privacy settings that you can have, lots of different privacy settings, and I'll talk about those in a minute. You can go into all of these green links to find more information about the protections that they've got so that we won't lose the tree, and the guarantee that it's 100% free. I'll talk a little bit more about joining Wikitree and the honour code, which is what you need to sign to actually be able to make edits on Wikitree. So as you can see there, this was a week or so ago, 26 million profiles, and profiles is the term that Wikitree uses for people. And so that's 26 million people are on Wikitree, and over 7 million DNA test connections. And basically what a test connection is where someone has entered a test and that test is appearing on so many different ancestors. So the combination of the tests and the ancestors on Wikitree is how they arrive at that figure. And 792,000 genealogists, and that's people who have signed the honour code. So if you scroll down, these are some of the things that are actually on the homepage, and Wikitree has a lot of different things happening every week to try and encourage people to use Wikitree and to promote Wikitree to other people. And they have a blog which goes out, you can subscribe to. So they have things like the profile of the week, the photo of the week, the member of the week, and all of those things appear on this site, and you can get involved in some of these things. The other thing is that up the top of the page there, this year we've got the Wikitree challenge. Every week there's a Wikitree challenge, and they're basically inviting genealogists to provide some family information to Wikitree, and then all Wikitreeers get involved in trying to flesh out their tree and show and demonstrate to other genealogists how good Wikitree and the power of collaboration. So keep scrolling down and you'll see things like the question of the week, and some of those things there, those questions are coming from the forum which is called G2G, which is genealogists to genealogists, where you can ask questions, and the top 25 surnames from the day before, and that changes every day. So really, I mean, the key message is that Wikitree is a community and it's a shared tree, and we're working together to grow the tree. And the fact that the one thing that is probably different is that nobody owns an ancestor, so that if you share an ancestor with lots of other people, then you need to collaborate with the other members who share that ancestor in terms of developing their profile. But we'll talk a bit more about that soon. So when you getting started, this little menu, the menu bar there, the My Wikitree Code 12 Add Find Help, is at the top of every page or in Wikitree, and that's a menu of how to get around Wikitree. And underneath each of those is there's a drop down menu with lots of information, which I'll talk about as we go through. So basically there's 3 levels of membership. There's a guest membership, a family membership, and the Wiki Genealogist membership. I recommend you all get to the Wikitree Genealogist membership, because that's where you can make edits. Guests, when you sign up first, you become a guest, and then you can look around the site, but you can't do much else. Family members are only available to be invited by an existing member. So I could invite my cousin or my aunt or someone like that to be a member. So they don't have to actually join Wikitree, but they can actually add information on my behalf. So in those sorts of cases, the Wiki Genealogist is taking responsibility for the actions of the family member. Now there's help everywhere in Wikitree, but you've got to try and find it. So over on the right hand side there's a help menu, and that's the drop down menu. of the help index. And if you look there, the forum G2G, that's where you ask questions, and the help index has a whole lot of supporting information there for you. So it's all about collaboration, as I said, and signing the honour code is a big thing. So once you sign that, you become a wiki genealogist. But basically, it's not a scary thing to sign the honour code. If you have a look at those 9 points, they're pretty reasonable in that these are the things that you're saying you'll commit to. So it's important when you sign up to Wikitree that you are okay with these things. And probably the biggest issue we have for people is whether they want to collaborate on ancestor profiles where you share it with other people. Most of the other things are quite reasonable, and most people, I think, would be quite comfortable in abiding by those things. So basically, it's sort of like a code of practice in a way, in that you're committing that you will do these things, and that mistakes are unintentional, that you'll be courteous and work with others. And one of the key things that I think Wikitree is keen to promote is the fact that it's an accurate family tree and that sources are essential. And when you join Wikitree at the first time, you'll be greeted by what's called a greeter, who will try and help you get to where you need to go in Wikitree to make sure that you actually, if you're adding profiles, that you're citing sources and doing those things that Wikitree sees as important. They're there to help you. I think Wikitree can be a little bit confusing when you first start, but to me, when I started, it was all about formatting. I couldn't understand why things wouldn't look the way I expected them to look, taking my normal word processing understanding into it. And the reason for that is that you are using HTML code, I believe, but there's a few tricks to learning that, and I'll show some of those to you that make it a lot easier. And once you get used to that, I think you'll be pretty right. It's not that difficult. Now, you can upload GEDCOMs, and I'll talk about GEDCOMs, but the preferred process is to use GEDCompare, which is like loading a GEDCOM and finding out which of your ancestors are already on Wikitree, so that you can add the profiles for the ones that aren't. And there's some useful tech tools. There's a lot of tech people involved on Wikitree, and there's always new tools being developed, which can be very good. And as I said at the beginning, the DNA, there's lots of DNA functions on Wikitree that are really good. So just as a reminder, at the top menu bar is a site menu, and those places on the right are where you can get help. There is that introduction to Wikitree menu item there, and that has a lot of information about getting started and what sort of things you need to do, working through in a logical sort of process. So go there if you're new. So how do you join? You click here to join. At the top right hand corner of the screen, there's a login button, and basically you just click on that. It's not very, to me, I don't think the home screen is very clear in terms of how to join, but that's what you do, log in, and then you have to click here to register and join the community. So you create an account, and you'll initially be given a guest access. That gives you the opportunity to go and look around Wikitree, and then eventually, if you decide you want to become a wiki genealogist, you have to sign the honour code, and then you'll be given the wiki genealogist, what do they call the things, badge. As I said before, it's all about collaboration on Wikitree, and if you have the wiki genealogist badge, then you can edit profiles and upload images, and different people, of course, privacy levels, certain profiles have different privacy levels, and sometimes you might need to join what's called the trusted list. So people who are on a particular profile's trusted list are able to do more things to that profile. So there's lots of ways to collaborate. You can send private messages to the profile manager, and the profile manager is the person who's responsible for that particular profile. There's a public comments field, and there's public Q&A in question and answers in the Genealogist to Genealogist forum. So you can ask questions there. And because Wikitree's got that 792 genealogist members, there's a lot of very experienced people out there. So you can ask questions about research, not just about profiles, but about research questions and where to get information. And there's often people from all over the world there. So even if you've got some obscure place, you might find someone there that can answer your question and give you some help about finding the information you need. So that can be very useful. So every profile has a unique identifier. And you can see mine at the top of the page. My maiden name was Coate, and so Coate 12. So there was only 11 Coate profiles on Wikitree when I joined, and I was the 12th one. So that also becomes a URL, and you can see that there, wikitree.com wiki/Coate12. So if I shared that link with someone, it would come to the profile for me on Wikitree. There's also on Wikitree, you are able to search on the box at the top for other people on Wikitree. So you just pop their names in the top, first name, last name, or if you know their ID, you can find them that way. Sometimes people provide you with an ID and it's not that easy to find them if they have a common name. So you can key in the ID there and click on the search bar. The name on watch list. Now, a watch list is basically all the profiles that you profile manage. So everyone has a watch list. It might only have yourself on it when you start, but as you add profiles and become responsible for different profiles on Wikitree, your watch list will grow. And that box up there is a way to actually, if you've got Jim Brown, if you type it into the first name, last name box, you're going to get thousands of Jim Browns. But if you put Jim Brown in the watch list field there, you'll get the Jim Brown who's on your watch list, not all the other Jim Browns. So that can be easy. Whenever you see these dark fields, here, like it says ID options, click on those things because they're usually shortcuts to enable you to do other things. In that particular case, you were able to copy the ID or create an internal link, which I'll talk about later on, for that profile that you're on, which can be handy when you're working on Wikitree. So the process, every person in the tree has a profile. And the idea is to start from yourself, create a profile for you, and then work backwards in your tree until you come up with someone who's already in the tree. And instead of creating a new profile for that person, you would need to link your tree to that particular person. And I'll show you how to do that as we go along. So this is my profile, and member profiles are a little bit different to standard profiles. And you can see there's a lot of information on this section, and this is populated by yourself as you work on Wikitree. Some of these things are put there via other method like badges. So at the top there, you can see that I've signed the honour code back in August 2013. And when you do that, you get the option to create this first little section. It's got a few, how can I say it, options under the communication preferences that you can choose so that this section populates. And so I chose I'm interested in communicating. There's an option to say you're not interested in communicating. And the second part, I want to share anyone who shares the same genealogical or historical interests. Now there's other options that will populate there depending on what your preferences are. You don't have to talk to anybody. This can say I don't want to talk to anybody. You can show your family tree. I've said here is my family tree. Because I want to share and I want to collaborate. And that little box there that's got ancestors, you might see that little symbol next to the answer. I can't seem to get my mouse to show on the screen, but anyway, that ancestor box has a little tree symbol there. When you click on any of those little tree, keep an eye out for those little symbols, because they're all over Wikitree and they are easy ways to look at trees of people throughout. So then you can write a little blurb about your main interests, and I've just got links there to the various things that I'm mostly interested in and my blog site. Now, these bottom two boxes are populated from other things on Wikitree, and when you join Wikitree, you'll be asked to about your DNA interests, and it says there that I'm following 52 Accuracy, Announcements Australia, Britain, Cassidy Coat. They're the tags that I've added when I joined. So they just show what I'm interested in, so that people coming to my profile know what I'm interested in. And the bottom one, those orange labels there, Bateman, Cassidy, Coates, Brown, Unknown, were my most active surnames in 2021 so far. So that will change all the time. I can't understand why Brown's there, but anyway, I must have done something to have them there. And the badges on the right are badges that are given to you as you work through Wikitree and join projects and do all sorts of things. You can see there I've got 133 badges. One of the things is a contribution badge you get every month, so there's a lot of those as well. So there's more, and then there's more information as you work down the page. But before I move on to a normal profile, I just wanted to talk to you about this menu again. So up the top there, you've got My Wikitree. So everyone will have that, and these menu items all relate to the profile, to you as a user. And you can see lots of things that are there that you can click on. And I would recommend that you go through each of these menu items and click on having a look at some of those things. Wikitree has bolded the ones that most people go to, clicking on the family tree and tools and the nav homepage, which I'll talk about in a minute. So all of those things are useful. Suggestions are errors that possibly might be in some of your profiles, which are good to look at and try and fix up. But I won't go into that too much. And you can see there your watch list as well. And for those of you interested in DNA, that DNA confirmation will give you some clues about possible ancestors and who might you look at for certain tests. I'm not going into that in great detail today, but I'm happy to talk to people later about that. Okay, so when we're back on my profile, you can see down the bottom there that there's this menu, profile, edit, images, family tree and tools. Now I'm calling that for our purposes the action menu. So that is actually the menu relating to the profile that you're actually on. So this is about, in this case, editing my own profile, and it's where other profiles start. So all that information above that menu item isn't on most of the profiles on Wikitree. It's only on member profiles. Now, a little bit before we move on to general profiles, when you add to the tree, you can add a GEDCOM, or you can do the process I mentioned earlier, which was using the GEDCompare process. And it's uploading a GEDCOM. I wouldn't recommend loading people to Wikitree via a GEDCOM unless you're really experienced, but it is useful to do the GEDCompare reports. And when you load your GEDCOM, it'll come up with a report like this where it suggests a whole lot of people. You click on that compare button and it can tell you, you can compare the two profiles side by side. So you can look at what your GEDCOM is saying for your William Winton opposed to all these other people that Wikitree thinks are similar. If you say they're the same person, it'll match them. And then by the end, if you've looked at your whole list and you want to add them to Wikitree, there's a little add button that appears. Now, the trick with GEDCOMs is to start small. So only load a small GEDCOM at a time, and then make sure that once you've loaded people to Wikitree that you edit the edit the profile to make it look all right, because sometimes with GEDCOMs it brings in a lot of extraneous information. You can also download a GEDCOM, so if you find information on Wikitree that you think is useful for your research, you can download that and upload it to your family tree program or other program that you might have. Now, this is a simple profile on Wikitree. This is my third great-grandmother, and she has just got limited information there and one source. Mostly, Wikitree is very keen for you to have at least one source on a profile. Now, you can say something like, ancestor chart handed down by great Aunt Betty or something in 1999. That is a source and that is a valid source. But really, we want to have more sources than that. We want to have proper BDM references and that sort of thing. But at least one source is what's required. Here's where the profile manager appears, and you can see there that I'm the profile manager, and that's where you can send a private message to the profile manager. You just click on that and it'll open up your email. Now, privacy is an issue, and there's lots of different privacy levels. This particular one's open, and open profiles are usually older profiles, over 100 years, have to be open. But there's lots of different privacy levels that we can choose. Now, members need to be in one of these privacy levels. So private with public biography, private with public tree, or private with both public biography and family tree. I've got a public biography and a public family tree. Anyone interested in DNA research needs to have one of the ones with public family trees so that the DNA features work for you. As you can see, the ones above that, private and unlisted, are mainly for living members or profiles that perhaps need to be private for other reasons. And the ones down the bottom, public and open, public usually are for deceased people, but they're close relatives. You can still make them public, but not let other people edit them. And open, as I said, is required for over 150 years ago, or people who died over 100 years ago. But you can click on all those links there and it'll tell you a bit more about those privacy levels. So this is my great-grandmother, Rebecca Cassidy, and this is just an example of a more detailed profile. And as you can see, that menu bar, action menu bar, is at the top of her profile. Now you can add photos and things like stickers. This Rebecca Cassidy Murphy was born in the colony New South Wales. Down there is a sticker, and we'll talk more about those. On the right, you can see the DNA connections. I've added my DNA test to Wikitree, and it appears on her profile, as does my mother's and other relatives. You can see private DNA Roberts down there on the right-hand side. So it's showing all these things are live links. Anything with a green and an underline is a live link, which you can go through and get more information. Particularly important on that DNA connection side, there's a lot of information in those links if you want to click on them. Now, there's this box here that appears underneath that main actions menu, and basically these are just to move further down in the profile. There's things called categories, which are a way of adding your ancestors to different lists that appear on Wikitree, and some of those other things are there as well, comments and things. So categories can be things like places, or I've got a Cassidy name study going, so you can see there a category for the Australia Cassidy name study. Cemeteries, that sort of thing. There's lots of different categories and you can be quite creative in creating categories. Comments field is for anyone who wants to leave a message, and you might know something about this profile. You might want to say, I know that her great-grandfather was so-and-so. You can put it down there if it's not there. And you'll get an email. The profile manager will get an email, but other people will also see that information. And because this profile is open, you can see there that the padlock is actually open up on the right-hand side. Other people can edit it. I find that most people don't, if you've got a really well-developed profile, most people don't actually edit it. They might talk to you privately about it. But there's a lot of profiles on Wikitree that need improvement. So it's really most people don't object to people making changes to the profiles. There's also this section down the bottom about matches and merge, and this is for looking at whether there's other duplicates on Wikitree and trying to fix those things up. You'll see down the bottom there too that there's all these things about how many degrees Rebecca is away from different people. And my family always used to talk about our relation to Daniel O'Connell and the famous liberator of Ireland. And it's now showing that Rebecca is 10 degrees away from Daniel O'Connell. It took me a long time to work out how we were connected, which is by marriage, but Wikitree now can do it instantaneously. And you can see here, this is a thing called the connection finder. So you can see here how we're connected to Daniel O'Connell. And the green tabs are about the blood relationships, and then the yellow ones are about where the relationship changes. So it's showing, it goes back to a female Sweeney. We know she married Maurice O'Connell. And then that's his line going back to Mary O'Connell and then to Daniel O'Connell. But Daniel O'Connell and Mary O'Connell were third cousins, so there's a lot more relationships there anyway. So if you go down the bottom, you can see that we've put the profiles O'Connell 837 and Cassidy 446 to find that connection. So you can put your own profile in there against Daniel O'Connell and see how far you go. But really, you can use it on anyone on Wikitree. And this is a good thing to use for DNA, so that if you've got someone else who's on Wikitree, you can put yourself in there and your matches ID in there and see if anything comes up, blood or otherwise. And this is where you find, these are under the Find menu. So Connections up the top there is the one we just spoke about, where it shows any connection via blood or otherwise. But if you go down to that one that says relationships, that's a blood only relationships, so it won't include the connections by marriage. Now if we scroll down a bit further in Rebecca's biography, you can see here that I've added lots of photos, so you can insert photos into the biography. And one of the good things is inline sourcing, which is quite easy to do once you get the hang of it. And as I said in the beginning, Wikitree is a great alternative, I think, to a blog. If you're a bit nervous about adding a blog, you can put a lot of things here on Wikitree the same way as you might do in a blog. Now, scrolling even further down the profile, you can see here the DNA confirmation area. So this is a section that you would add yourself if you have DNA confirmations. And you can see those little yellow boxes with the ticks on them next to Thomas Cassidy and Mary Cassidy Sweeney, that we believe that Rebecca has DNA has been confirmed to both sides of her line, her mother and her father. And the detail there is the source confirmation that you are required to write. If you add those DNA confirmed indicators, you must write a citation to say why you're confirming that. And you can see there on the right those radio button boxes where I've ticked father is confirmed with DNA or mother is confirmed with DNA. They've got these other confidence levels, and I think you should use those confidence levels because they're really helpful in the relationship finder, which I'll show in a second. And if you've got DNA matches but you haven't got enough information to confirm it via the Wikitree standards, you can class the father as confident and write a little note in the DNA box. Similarly, if you've got sources showing, paper sources showing that you're definitely sure the father is the father, birth certificates, death certificates, that sort of thing, you would click confident. Where it's not sourced, it would be uncertain. And down the bottom here, you can see in the source area, the inline citations will have a number, and then you can also add other sources and they would appear like that one in the box. So just looking at the relationship to me, so whilst my Wikitree menu item is about yourself, the member, the next one, Cassidy 446, is about this particular profile. So every profile has this menu, and once again, I would go through each of those if I were you to have a look at some of the things that it's telling you about that particular profile. And relationship to me is the blood relationship we spoke of earlier. And when you click on that, it tells me that Rebecca Murphy is my great-grandmother. And you can see there that it's in brackets, it's got DNA confirmed, and that's because I've got the DNA ticks on all the people up to Rebecca. So that's important for blood relationships, and it will show the uncertain indicators if uncertain indicators are in any of the trail there. So this is the family tree. When you're in that menu, the actions menu at the top of the page for a particular person, you click on family tree and tools and you'll get this. This is my mother's profile. You can see that I've DNA confirmed quite a lot of people. I've still got my brick wall, Arthur George Courtney there, and I have no DNA matches on Edward Roberts. So who knows if my tree is correct for Edward. So it's quite an attractive tree, and you can send this as a link to people. So you can use the URL at the top of the page to send it to people. So it's a very easy way to share information with others, particularly for DNA research. A lot of people aren't Ancestry members, and even though you might send them a link to your Ancestry tree, they can't see it. So this is a good vehicle to be able to provide information to anyone, and they can view it for free. There's a whole lot of tools that are under that family tree and tools menu item, and these are a whole lot of the genealogical research reports that you can generate, and these are changing all the time, and these are available for every profile. Now, the compact family tree is probably the best one to send to people because it can give you up to 254 ancestors. But a lot of people who aren't used to working with them find them a little bit confusing. So I would normally start off with the one we showed earlier, particularly if you're talking about more recent connections. So I won't go through all that, but there's a lot of information there. And also there's a lot of tools that are available, and if you click on that fan chart option, there's a whole lot of different charts that you can generate there. So if you're on a particular profile, all these reports will generate based on that particular profile. Now here's the compact family tree that I was talking about before for myself. You can't see it all because it's got 254 ancestors, but it's using the Unintuffle numbers, and so it's a little bit confusing for people who can't follow that. You can see there that the DNA confirmed people show up, so it's a handy ready reckoner for yourself. And at the top of the page, there is a shareable link that you can send to people as well. One of the things I discovered when I was preparing for this session was under those tools was this Ancestor Explorer, which I thought was quite interesting. You put in a ID of a descendant, and that Roberts 7303 is my mother. And I just selected, out of curiosity, 15 generations and the criteria of Australian immigrants. There's a whole lot of criteria there, but a lot of them are US-centric. But this one was interesting, I thought. And when I generated the query, it shows me 7 ancestors of my mother who came to Australia, and the times that were when they came and where they were born. So that's very interesting. I mean, I obviously know that about my mother, but a DNA match might not know that. So it can be useful for interrogating DNA matches and seeing where their ancestors came from in a quick and easy way. So editing a profile, now this is a little bit tricky for some people because of the formatting issues I mentioned earlier. Now you click, this is my 5th great grandfather, Rose Sweeney. So you click on the edit button, and when you open up the profile, you'll be presented with this. And this is where you make changes. So the changes in the boxes are fairly easy. And this is where you would add a father or add a mother. So you need to be in the edit function to do that. So you can either add the father manually. So if you know the person, and you just click on that, and then you create a new profile, and you're presented with a page very similar to this. But if you know the person's on Wikitree already, this is where you add in their Wikitree ID. So you click on that field and it'll ask you to add a name or a Wiki ID. So if you know they're on Wikitree, that's you add the Wikitree ID, and then that'll connect you up to that person. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about was this, this menu item. When you scroll halfway down the page, when you're editing a profile, you'll see this box. And when I first started Wikitree, I just ignored this box. I didn't really do anything with it for quite a long time. But really, this is the key to being able to format things on Wikitree easily. Now, you can see those first two, bold and italic. We're all used to those. But some of those other ones, you think, oh, what the hell are they? And the first one I'm going to talk about is the category field. So I mentioned before when we were talking about Rebecca's profile, I had the Cassidy name study and places where she was, she had lived to appear in those lists. And so this is where you would add that. So you click on that little thing that it's a sort of like a, I don't know, index, and it comes up with add category. And the beauty of this is that there's already thousands of categories created on Wikitree. So you key something into that box. Once you start typing what you want to categorize, then a whole lot of options appear and you just click on the appropriate one. So I was looking for Rathclooney Townland, and as soon as I got to RATHC, all these options came up, and you can see Rathclooney down there, 4th from the bottom. So I just select that and it automatically adds the category to Rebecca's profile, Rose profile. The next one is a Wikitree ID and name. So if you want to refer to people on Wikitree in your profile, you can make them appear as a link. So if I wanted to talk about Rose's daughter, Margaret Sweeney, I would put in the Wikitree, I would click this button, that box would appear in the profile, and then you would just type in Margaret's ID and then Margaret, or however you wanted to describe her, under that name field, and that will create a link in your biography for her, which can be quite useful. This is where you don't want text to be formatted. You put a no wiki sign on it and it won't format it the way it thinks it should. And this is probably the most important one, is to cite your source. So if you click on this button, it'll appear on your biography with these 2 reference tags, one on either side. Now, this will make it appear as an inline source in your biography. So you type the source in the middle of it. So this would be how you would say type a source between those 2 reference tags. And once you've saved it from the edit profile and are back in looking at the profile on the main page, it'll appear in the sources list with a number next to it like that. So that's very useful for having professional looking profiles, I think. Another thing that's of interest is this Wikitree Plus. This enables you to find stickers and project boxes and a whole lot of other things quickly. So I mentioned before the sticker that was on Rebecca's profile. She was born in the colony, so in these, I've just typed AUS and a whole lot of options have come up. So I can just select that Australia, born in the colony, and add it to Rebecca's profile. Now, another thing that's very useful is research using what's called Wikitree X. Now, Wikitree X is a Google Chrome add-on extension, and you can find it there on every profile. See, I've got the Griffin 4106 at the top there, and right down the bottom, there's this research field. So once you click on, so you have to enable it first in Chrome, this extension. And add it onto, and you need to be using the Chrome browser for this to work. But once you do that, you then log in. It'll present you with that Roots Tech Wikitree interrogation box, and you put in your password for Wikitree, and then you log on to this Roots Tech search site, and then you are able to your profile will automatically populate whichever search template you choose. So you can search Ancestry, Family Search, and a whole range of other sites using this extension. So it's very useful. It's just like if you're in Ancestry and you populate the edit box from your family tree. Now you can enable and disable certain searches. So you can see down the bottom there that I've disabled the American ancestors because I wouldn't look at that hardly at all. But I've got things like Ancestry, Family Search, Find a Grave, and those sorts of things enabled so that they would come up if I wanted to search on them. It's a very good research tool, and you do it from the ancestor that you're on, and you'll get queries relating to that particular ancestor. So as I said, access is via Google Chrome, and you need to add the extension. There's a couple of other useful tools there too. The Wikitree tables, if you're wanting to insert a table into Wikitree, this is a fabulous little tool. And the bottom one is about cleaning GEDCOMs up, but that's probably a little more advanced, but we could talk about that later. So Wikitree also has a navigation page which you can use, and it's really like a personal notes page, and you can see it under your My Wikitree menu there. And the way you can set it up in lots of different ways. And I've got the discussion feed and my family activity feed showing, as well as my personal notes. But you can actually change that. You might want to have different things appearing on this page, and that's under settings. So family activity page is just showing you who's made changes to profiles that you are either the profile manager for or are on the trusted list for. So that can be useful for keeping an eye on what other people are doing to people you're interested in. And when you go to the settings, you can decide where when you log into Wikitree, the first page you see. Now I've got it going to my navigation homepage because I have a lot of links there about different things that are of interest to me, but you can have it going to other places like the homepage or the G2G homepage or your watch list. Depends how you use Wikitree. Now you might have noticed on the previous slide that I had a category called Coat 12. This is what's called a personal category. So you can create these as well for yourself to help you to navigate around Wikitree. And I've got a whole lot of things set up here that enables me to get to things quickly and not have to remember where they are all the time. And the thing though is that the categories are actually viewable by other people, but pages you can set a privacy level. So this is a category, and so I've set it up so that it hasn't got anything that I'm not too worried about sharing with other people, because other people might see it. If you scroll further down in the page, you can see links to the name studies that I'm interested in and various other subcategories that I work on. And right down the bottom, there's the pages. So these are separate pages. So they're not a profile, they're not a person, but they're a page where I can keep information. And I tend to, some of them, you can see that they've all got the public but privacy level, because they've got that little green dot, which means I'm the only one that can make changes to those. So if you've got an interesting story about your ancestor that you want to share, but it doesn't really, it's too long for the profile, you can create a page and give it that green privacy level, tell your story. It'll still be on Wikitree like a blog, but it's viewable by others, but no one else can touch it. Now, there's lots and lots of DNA features, and I don't have the time to go through all these DNA features with you today, but I'm happy to talk to others later if people are interested. But basically, the whole feature of populating your test up and down the line is the big thing, and it alerts others to the fact that you have DNA tested and is a way to encourage collaboration. Also, finding them on your own ancestors gives you some hints as well. We've talked a little bit about the DNA confirmations and giving people the tick. But the big thing is that you've got to be connected to the large tree for all these DNA features to work. Now, when you go to Family Tree and Tools, which is in that Actions menu, as I said at the beginning, you scroll right down to the bottom of the page and select the DNA Ancestor View. And in the DNA Ancestor View, it's going to show you something like this, where it's got your ancestors, the little tags on them, AU, X, MT, are showing who contributed to that DNA, and it'll show the confirmations who you've got confirmed. And the good thing is that if you've put all your ancestors in, you can also share these lists with your matches, showing who are the likely people that contributed to your mitochondrial or your X chromosome and things like that. So these are all shareable. When you go to an ancestor, so if I went to my ancestor, my maternal second great grandmother Mary Sweeney, if you click on the DNA descendants view, it'll show who inherited the X chromosome. So if you're looking for someone to test, then you might find someone here. And but be wary, because only the people that are on Wikitree will be appearing in this list. So it won't be a full descendants list. But you may find people you don't know about. For example, that private DNA will know in the middle of the page there has done an autosomal test. Now, I may not have known about that person, so it can be a clue for doing further research. And this is available on every profile. So, but it's really only as good as the information that is in Wikitree. The Y chromosome is similar. It shows you who inherited the Y chromosome from, and this is my maternal second great grandfather, Thomas Cassidy, who inherited the Y chromosome, who is DNA confirmed with the little ticks, and who's tested. So you can see down there that very bottom person has got a little Y symbol next to him that's showing that they've tested the Y chromosome. So adding your DNA test can be a little bit confusing for people. You go to Family Tree and Tools, and the first thing is to find the DNA Ancestors tab. Then you add your DNA test. So you go to the next menu item along, or the third menu item along there. Now it takes 24 hours to populate your test on Wikitree, so all the servers need to update. And then once it's done that, you can click on that test details URL there that's got the red asterisk next to it, and it'll show you all the people that have been populated with your DNA test. So you can see them on the left there, Ellen Pace Aburrow going down to William Anger. They're all my ancestors, and my test is now appearing on all their profiles. And it looks like what you can see there in the middle there, where it says DNA connections. It's showing my mother's and her brother as well there, but if it's just yours, it will just show. And so I've put my GEDmatch kits in there. I'm looking at those. I need to update them. They're not quite right. But that's where your kit numbers will show. If you want to show them, it's best to show your kit numbers so people can do some interrogation as well. So once again, for the test to show up, you've got to have a private but public family tree using either of those two privacy levels. And if you are confused, you ask questions in the G2G forum or look up the help index. There's a lot of information in there. So one of the other things you can do with Wikitree is to join a project. And there's lots and lots of projects on Wikitree. There's geographical projects, there's topical projects, there's what we call functional projects, which are about improving the data on Wikitree. And you can find them all there under the Find menu. And if you go down to projects and click on that, it'll come up with a whole list of different projects. They're just some of the badges that I've received for joining different projects, and you get one of those when you join any project on Wikitree, and they appear on your profile as we talked about at the beginning, so people know what you're interested in. Now, joining a project is often a very good way about learning how to use Wikitree, because the Australia project has a Google group where we communicate via email. So if people got questions, they can ask questions about how to do things. We also have a group on Facebook, which you can also join. Now, people from the project will write to you once or twice a year just to say, hey, are you still out there and are you still interested in working on the project? So don't be too concerned if you get contacted. Please reply to say, yes, I am. We just really want to make sure people are still wanting to be involved, and it's okay to just work on your own profiles, but it's a good opportunity to get involved in broader activities. So join all of you. I'd put out a call to help us increase the Australian content on Wikitree by joining Project Australia, and you can see there that that's process of how you would join. Basically, you just answer our welcome post, and then we give you a badge, and then people are from the project will contact you, or you can contact them to ask questions. So there's a lot of information on the project page, and there's lots of different teams that we have. Some of them are more active than others, but there's some of the examples of different things. People can work on states, so if you're predominantly interested in New South Wales, you could join the New South Wales team. You can get involved with convicts or the Eureka Stockade or any of these sorts of things. So when you join a project, it's just a good way to help improve the content on Wikitree and work with others with similar interests. And some of those things down the bottom right-hand corner there's some badges that I've received. These are stickers that you can add to your profile if you want to. I've recently done the Project Improvement Voyage, which is helping you to make sure that you're developing your biographies in a best practice way. And once you've achieved that performance improvement project voyage, you get one of these badges like I've got there. It's very useful, and it's been quite good to confirm what I'm doing right as well as what I'm doing wrong, and continually learning to improve how you present profiles on Wikitree. When I look at some of the profiles I did back in 2013, and I'm still trying to fix some of them up, I shudder. But anyway, onward and upward, as Chris Whitten says. So Wikitree is fun. There's lots of different things you can get involved in. Regularly there are source-a-thons and scan-a-thons and all sorts of different thons. We have a Wizards of Australia team that usually goes into all these SONs. It's really about improving Wikitree and making sure that we focus on a weekend on adding sources to sources that are profiles that don't have any. And if you're on the Australia team, we try and just improve Australian resources, Australian sources on those teams. And if you're lucky, you'll get a hat given to you by Mel, which is my little witch's hat down there. Wizard's hat, I should say. Plus also recently there was the Wikitree challenge of Johnny Pearl, you know, those of us interested in DNA, the fabulous Johnny Pearl. And you can read about how he found the challenge for him personally, because as I said at the outset, we looked at his ancestry and tried to improve on it. And he was a little surprised, I think, that Wikitree managed to break down a couple of his brick walls for him through the collaborative efforts of everyone on Wikitree. So I'd recommend reading his blog because he gives a very balanced view about what he thought going in about Wikitree and One World Trees, and also what the benefits were of participating in the challenge. So that's all I had for today, and hoping that it's been useful. There is a lot of material there, and that's because there's a lot of aspects of Wikitree that really you are of use, and but you need to just explore some of those things. So thanks very much.
Okay, we've got some
Danielle.
questions. Are you ready for questions?
Good. Certainly.
I think the first question has been answered by some of your slides after it was asked, but I'll mention it. Nerida asked how it is that your great-grandmother's DNA connection shows your DNA link if she's not been tested. So I think the slide where you showed that if you add your link to yourself, it then shows up on all your ancestors. That's probably the answer to that question.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. Yep. Sorry, my phone's ringing. Just ignore that.
That's all right.
Yeah. So as soon as you add your test, it then goes up the line, and it goes up depending on the test. The Y-DNA test populates up that line further than autosomal tests, and that's because, you know, the Y and the mtDNA actually do go further in time, back in time. Are you still there?
Yes, and that's different from what you were showing us about DNA confirmed. That's a different exercise. So one's automatic because you're listed as they're listed as your ancestors, and then DNA confirmed is a different process.
Yes, you add that yourself. So that's actually user generated. Yep.
Yeah. The other question that Nerida had was that she has difficulty adding photographs. It's probably best just to show her where she can find instructions for that, I think.
Yes, well, I'll just quickly show you. That's this image profile menu item just at the top of the page is the image. Oh, there's me. Basically, at the top of the page here, it says click here to upload it, and it's really you just add the file here and you populate this information and upload the image. If you want to center it in the biography, that's a little bit more tricky, and really go to the help index and you should be able to find information on that. And I think at the bottom, once you've added an image, there are some instructions at the bottom right-hand corner of the image page, which give you some limited information about that.
Great. So Brian's asked the debatable question about whether it's best to do bulk uploads or one by one. I know my preference is to do one by one, but perhaps you'd like to answer that.
I think the Wikitree preference is to do the one by one, but you can do the GEDCOM uploads, but you need to do them in small batches, I believe, so that you can actually edit them and tidy them up. The idea of one by one is so that we end up with a tree that is formatted nicely and all the profiles look okay. When you load by GEDCOM, there's some funny things that happen to them once they get added, and you really have to be diligent to go in and fix all those funny little things that have come through from the GEDCOM. And I think for a long time there was no GEDCOMs were allowed. When I first started, GEDCOMs were allowed. Then we had a period where they weren't allowed, and we only had GEDCompare. But it's now been brought back in a different way. But so unless you're really familiar with what you're doing, I would say add one at a time. I do add trees for my DNA research. So if I've researched somebody and their connections to me, I'll put a lot of those people on Wikitree, and I tend to add them via the GEDCOM. But I would then spend a day going through everything that I've uploaded and tidying it up. But you have to be diligent like that. And if you're just going to upload a GEDCOM and dump it, that's really not the Wikitree way. They're looking for you to try and make sure that each profile looks professional, and you know, it doesn't have to have much information on it, but it just doesn't. We don't want junk, I suppose. That's the answer.
Okay, so Gail has asked whether you have to start with yourself or whether you can set up a profile and tree for someone who you're not related to.
Well, you have to join and set your own profile up. You don't have to add your parents to yourself, but I don't see why you wouldn't. But you can actually do a floating tree, no problem. And that's one of the beauties of Wikitree, and I'm often doing that for DNA research, adding information I know is somehow connected to me. I've worked out that they're connected to me, but I don't know how. That's what I'll put them on Wikitree, hoping to get some bites from people from Wikitree. I find that I get more contact from Wikitree than from Ancestry and other sites. So it is quite useful in that regard. So definitely, yes, you can do that.
So a related question from Grant has said, can you omit yourself in recent generations entirely and start the tree several generations ago because of privacy concerns?
Well, you can. But as I said, you have to have your own profile because you can't get started on Wikitree unless you do. But I think the privacy levels that Wikitree has covers all those issues, because you can make your parents private and nothing shows. You can even give them an unlisted category, but I don't think you would want to do that. But by giving them a private status, they won't show up on other people's profiles, but they'll just see private, just like on Ancestry. But your tree will still work, and your DNA connections will still work. If you don't have your parents on there and you add your DNA,
Sorry, we've lost sound from Veronica. Veronica, if you can hear me, maybe if you switch off your webcam, might fix it. Do you want to try talking? We still can't hear you.
hello.
Hello, we can hear you now. Thank you. Oh, you're frozen again, having connection issues there. No, still can't hear you. Sorry, Veronica. Okay, well, while we wait, we'll wait a little bit longer to see if we can get Veronica back. But thank you, everyone, for attending. I'll just look through a couple more of these questions. Gregory, you've asked whether if someone else is profile manager for a profile that you'd like, whether you can take over the profile. You can, of course, approach them and ask them if they're happy to make you profile manager. Sometimes they will, but you can't just take it by force. But no, as long as it's an open profile, you'll be able to contribute to it even if you're not the profile manager. I'm not sure if anyone can hear me. Do you want to put your hands up if you can hear me, and I'll keep talking? Good, thank you. I think it's just problems at Veronica's end. So there was another question here about instructions for adding a floating tree. It's really just you find someone in the existing tree that floating tree is related to and just start adding people to that. So if you find someone who you want to add, you can add children to, or you can add parents to, or spouses, so you can add them that way. So floating is not so much a good idea. It's really trying to add them to the one tree in some way or another. Maybe Veronica's leaving and coming back, I'm not sure. Just checking any other questions here. So Gail's asked a question about sourcing something from an ancestor who was an NPE and there's no paper trail. That's, I think, a matter of how you cite DNA evidence, Gail, so you might want to talk to Veronica later about that. She has developed a handout as well about source citations for DNA evidence. Brian's question about projects, I'm not really sure. Brian wants to know if anyone can start a project. I think Veronica would have to answer that, and we seem to have lost her, so we can refer that question to her as well. Well, it is past time and we have lost Veronica, so I think it's best if we end the webinar now. If you've got further questions, you could always post that on the Society's Facebook page. We've got a Society of Australian Genealogists Facebook page and also a discussion group for Society members. So if you have further questions that you would like Veronica to answer, please do feel free to post them there. So thank you everyone for your attendance, and you will get an email with the handout and the recording link in the next 24 hours. Thank you everyone.